Okay, so we're going to start with the daily review. The first one says write the formula for the area of a rectangle. So the area is just base times height. Or length times width, but in this case we'll use base times height. So we need to get B by itself. That's what B is asking us to do. And you need to use inverse operations. So this is multiplication. So to undo that, we're going to use division. And then you're going to simply have an equation that says B equals something divided by something. And you can use that to find the base of the rectangle. The next one is for the volume of the prison. So the formula for the volume of a prison is the area, capital B for area of the base, times the height. So again, we want to solve this formula for B. So we want B by itself. And you're going to have B is something divided by something using inverse operations. And we can use that formula then to find the area of the base of the prism. Okay, the rest of this lesson is going to be on rewriting equations. So we're isolating a different variable than the one that's given to us. Obviously, you guys don't have your student journals, but on page 15 to 17 in your student journal, there's an activity. How can you use the formula for one measurement to find the formula of a different measurement? So with activity 1, again, this is going to be pretty similar. Write the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle. So the perimeter is going to be 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So solving the formula for W. So this one's a little bit tricky. We need to get this W by itself, but we need to use inverse operations with similar to equations. So we need to get rid of this 2L. So it's added to 2W. So to get rid of this from one side, we can subtract it from both sides of our equation. So these are going to cancel on the right side, but on the left side, P and 2L are not like terms, so we cannot combine them. So that's just going to simplify to P minus 2L. Oops. And that's going to be equal to 2W. But W is still not quite by itself yet. So we have to undo multiplying by 2. And we can do that by dividing everything by 2. So we have a new formula now. W is going to equal P minus 2L divided by 2. And then we can plug in P, substitute P here, and substitute our length here. Whoops. Here. And then use order of operations to figure out what the width of this rectangle is. So make sure you do that. Make sure you find out what the width is. The next one, we have a triangle. So we want to write the formula for the area of a triangle. Well, the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, or the area is base times height divided by 2. So you can use either one, but we want to get h by itself in either equation. So remember, when we are getting rid of fractions, we can multiply by the reciprocal, which is just simply 2. So we would have 2a equals b times h, and then we can undo this multiplication to figure out what the height, what formula is going to give us the height. And it should be something divided by something. And then this one's going to be very similar. We need to undo this dividing by 2. So to undo that, we would multiply both sides by 2. So we have 2a equals b times h. And then it's going to be the same solving then to finish this one out. And you should have h is something divided by something else. And then last but not least, we have circles for this section. So we want the formula for the circumference of a circle. So there are 2 formulas for the circumference of a circle, but in this case we have the radius. So the circumference is going to be 2 pi r. And we want to solve this formula for r. So that means we have to get r by itself. So we need to undo multiplying by 2 and pi. So to undo multiplication, we can divide both sides by 2 and pi. And that's going to give us our formula for the radius of the circle. And then you can use that to figure out what r equals. So substitute our circumference in for c. And then figure out the length of the radius. And it should be, your units should be centimeters for the length of your radius. Next one we have a trapezoid and a parallelogram. So we want the formula for the area. So with a trapezoid, the area is going to be 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times the height. And we want to solve this formula for the height. So we want to get rid of this 1/2. So to get rid of that, we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by 2. So those are going to cancel. And then with h, we're multiplying by this quantity, b1 plus b2. So to undo multiplication, we're just going to divide both sides by b1 plus b2. Because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And again, on this side, it's going to cancel. So for this one, we're going to have the height is 2a divided by b1 plus b2. And we have quantities for b1, b2, and our area. So you can substitute those in and figure out the height of that trapezoid. And then this one's a parallelogram, so it's the same as a rectangle. The area is just going to be base times height. And you should be able to solve that for h and then figure out what the height of your parallelogram is going to be. And remember, for the first one, the units are in inches, and for the second one, the units should be in meters. Okay, and then the next one is for volume. So we're not going to get into volume because the formulas for volume get a little bit complicated. So we are going to move on to example 1. All right, so example 1, we're rewriting an equation. And the reason why we do this is to get these into slope-intercept form so that we can graph all of our lines pretty easily and efficiently. So we want to solve this equation, 2y plus 5x equals 6 for y. So that's telling us which variable we want to isolate. The majority of the time, we're going to be solving it for y. So 2y plus 5x equals 6. So in order to get rid of this positive 5x, we would have to subtract 5x from both sides of our equation. And again, 6 and 5x are not like terms. So you cannot combine 6 minus 5x. So on the left side, we still have 2y. And on the right side, we have 6 minus 5x. But y is still not isolated. So we have to divide both sides by 2. And when you divide a fraction, you have to divide everything by 2. So y is going to equal 6 divided by 2, which would give us 3. And then negative 5 divided by 2, which we're going to leave as a fraction, and get minus 5 over 2x. So this should look familiar because this is now in slope-intercept form. So we have a y-intercept of 0, 3, and a slope of negative 5 over 2. So we'd have a rise of down 5 and a run of 2. So if we wanted to graph that, we could graph it pretty quickly rather than having to plug numbers in, use an input-output table, and figure out what our other values are going to be. So just quickly, our y-intercept at 0, 3 is here. And then again, our slope is negative, so we're going down 5 and then right 2. So we'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then over 2. And that would give us our next point on the graph, which would be at 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops, I'm down 1 too far. So there's down 5 and over 2, which would be at 2, negative 2. And we could go down 5 and over 2 again, but this gives you an idea of our graph in slope-intercept form. So these are going to be similar. Again, we want to solve this equation for y. So we have to get rid of this negative x. In order to get rid of it, we have to add x to both sides. And if it helps, put a coefficient of 1 in front of there. So on the left side, negative 1x and positive 1x cancel out, and all we have left is this 5y. And then on the right side, we just have 10 plus 1x. Again, you cannot combine those because they're not like terms. 10 is just a constant, and then 1x is not similar to it. So then we have to divide everything by 5. We have to undo multiplication. And we end up with y equals 2 plus 1/5 x. And again, for that, we'd have a y-intercept of 2, a slope of positive 1/5. We could graph that very quickly. The next one, so we need to get rid of be careful with this one, because we're getting rid of a positive 4x. So in order to get rid of a positive 4x, we have to subtract 4x from both sides. So we have negative 4y equals 1 minus 4x. And then we have to undo multiplying by negative 4. So to undo multiplying by negative 4, we have to divide everything by negative 4. So our equation then is going to be y equals negative 0.25 or negative 1/4. I just changed that because if we wanted to graph it, we would need a decimal to graph rather than a fraction. And then, so that's our first division, 1 divided by negative 4. And then we have negative 4 divided by negative 4, which is going to give us plus 1x. So we'd have a y-intercept at negative 0.25. And then we would have a slope of positive 1 from there. So I'm going to leave this one for you to do in your notes. So make sure you don't leave this blank. And get a hold of me if you have questions and you need help isolating y in that equation. So that's really the important stuff. The next one is rewriting a formula. So we did some of this in the daily review. So here's our formula for surface area. And we need to solve the formula for the length L. So here's L. This is what we need to get by itself first. So we need to get down to multiplication and division, which means we have to get rid of this pi r squared. It's positive, so to get rid of it, we have to subtract pi r squared from both sides. So it's going to cancel out here, and then on the right side, we cannot combine those. So we simply have s minus pi r squared equals pi rl. Now we have multiplication with pi and r to get this L that we're looking for by itself. So we can undo that by dividing both sides by pi and r. And I would probably just leave this formula like this. L equals s minus pi r squared divided by pi r. You can simplify it a little bit, but if you were substituting numbers in to figure out what the length is going to be, that's probably going to be your most effective and easiest way to figure that out. 4 and 5 should be pretty simple for you. Make sure that you do them. So it says solve the formula for the red variable. So for number 4, you should have b equals and a formula that would give us the base. And then for simple interest, you should have capital P, which means principal, equals, and then a formula that's going to give us the principal if we know the interest, the rate, and the time. And then the last one, we'll do this one together. So surface area, we have S equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. And h is the variable that we're trying to solve for. So this is very, very similar to the example that we just did. We need to get rid of this 2 pi r squared. So we'd have to subtract that from both sides to get rid of it and keep the equation equivalent. So that cancels. And again, these are s and 2 pi r squared are not like terms. So s minus 2 pi r squared is going to equal 2 pi r h. And remember, h is what we're looking for. So now we just have all multiplication. We can undo that all in the same step and divide both sides by 2 pi r. And there's our formula for h. H equals s minus 2 pi r squared divided by 2 pi r. So that is going to give us, if we know the radius and we know the height, then we can figure out, if we know the surface area and we know the radius, then we can figure out what the height of the cylinder is, depending on the missing piece. Again, don't forget to figure out what B is for number 4, and figure out what P is, what formula is equal to for number 5. Okay, and then we have, so we have a sun is 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and lightning is 30,000 degrees Celsius. So we want to know which one is going to have a greater temperature. And we can use either one of these formulas. So we can either plug the Celsius in and figure out the other in order to compare, or we could plug the Fahrenheit and compare the Celsius. So in this case, we want to solve the formula for F. So with this, we could distribute that 5/9 through, but I would rather just get rid of it by multiplying by the reciprocal, which is 9/5. And that's going to cancel. So we would have 9/5 of the Celsius temperature is going to be our Fahrenheit minus 32. And we still don't have F completely by itself yet. So we have to undo this subtracting 32. And we would do so by adding 32 to both sides of our equal sign. So F is going to equal 9/5 our Celsius temperature, and then we have to add 32 degrees to that. So now we have our formula with F all by itself. So again, we could use either one of these for the next example to compare and see. So we just solved for this one, so why not use it? Okay, so we know that the sun is 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And we know that lightning is 30,000 degrees Celsius. So we can figure out the degrees that lightning is in Fahrenheit. So we take 9/5, and we have to multiply that by our Celsius temperature. And then we have to add 32 degrees to that. And that's going to give us our Fahrenheit temperature. So 9 divided by 5 times 30,000 is 54,000, and then add 32 to that, and we get 54,032 degrees Fahrenheit. So to answer the question, lightning has the greater temperature. And then the next question, so room temperature is considered to be 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Suppose the temperature is 23 degrees Celsius. Is that greater or less than the room temperature? So go ahead and figure out, you know that room temperature, which we'll call RT, is 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we'll call this GT for given temperature. Figure out how many degrees 23 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit. And then answer the question, is it greater than or less than room temperature? And then you have the practice questions. So try these, again, if you have questions. So you can see there are 7 questions. Again, I know you don't have your student journal, but complete these on the notes for your assignment for today. Solve each one of the first equations for y. And if you're feeling really ambitious, tell us what the y-intercept is. And tell us what the slope of your line would be. And then with 4 through 6, you're solving for the bolded variable, which is w in this case, r in this case, and h for number 6. So give those a try. I know this is not super easy. And let me know if you have any questions with that. And then 7 should be pretty simple, actually, even though it's a word problem. You should have the formula for the area of a triangle solved for h from our daily review. And then you can figure out what the height of that triangle is going to be. So again, make sure you do these correctly and let me know if you have any